need to find out all the nitty gritty and the details on Thor Love and Thunder post-credit scenes.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Cosmic Wonder. I'm your host, Warren Thompson, and Thor Love and Thunder is now in theaters.
Yes, it is.
There's a lot to talk about, including the ending and the 2 post-credit scenes, so let's not waste any time and dive right into it. But of course, I must issue a spoiler warning. If you have not seen Thor Love and Thunder yet, we are about to talk about some major spoilers. And please, right away, let me know what you thought about Thor Love and Thunder in the comments down below. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know. If you're still with us, let's get started. Now, one thing that I truly loved about Thor Love and Thunder is how the stories in it were pretty true to the comics. Now, of course, there were some changes, but this really did stick true to the stories from the comics, specifically Jane Foster's storyline, again, with just a few tweaks. And if you're thinking that she is dead and not coming back, I would bet against that and say that she is probably coming back. And I'll explain why. Now, of course, Thor Love and Thunder follows the story of Thor Odin's son, Jane Foster's the Mighty Thor, and Gorr, the God Butcher. Gorr the God Butcher's origin story is pretty similar to what it is in the comics. In the comics, Gorr has a big family. He has a wife, and he has a lot of kids. But sadly, they all start to die until he's left with only one child. He begs the gods for mercy to help save his kid, but unfortunately, it does nothing, and his son dies, leaving Gorr with no family whatsoever. So, after this happens, he starts to kind of bad talk the gods.
So they changed it
to
a daughter.
Say how he doesn't believe that they're out there, because if they were, why didn't they help? This leads to the people of his city outcasting him, and he is essentially walking through the wastelands waiting to die until he sees 2 figures fall from the sky to the ground. One is a golden god wearing gold armor, and one is Null, the symbiote god, wielding the all-black necro sword. And we kind of do see a figure that kind of looks like Null in Thor Love and Thunder, although they don't actually address who he is, and the rights to Null and the symbiotes are sadly owned by Sony, so we can't really say this is Null, but that's what they're implying. Now, in the comics, it's a little bit different because the Golden God asks Gorr for help. But Gorr is shocked because he can't believe that the gods are actually real. But then he gets really, really mad because he knows the gods are real but did not help him. So instead of helping the god, he takes the all-black necro sword and he kills him. This is pretty much what we saw in the beginning of Thor Love and Thunder. Gorr afterwards takes the all-black necro sword and makes a vow to kill all the gods, becoming Gorr the God Butcher. He would try to kill Thor on Earth, but the Vikings come to Thor's rescue, and this causes Gorr to retreat. And
always got
Gorr
them
goes on to hunt him down.
Star Wars
Meanwhile, the story
tendrils.
of Jane Foster in the comics is very, very similar to what we saw.
They could have gave that tone.
Jane Foster's
I guess
diagnosed
it'll
with
look too
cancer,
much like
and
Star
Thor
Wars.
actually becomes unworthy to lift Mjolnir. This is caused by Nick Fury actually whispering something into Thor's ear on the moon, which wasn't revealed at the time, but would later go on to be revealed that Nick Fury said Gorr was right, meaning that the world would be better if there were no gods in it. But the hammer then makes its way to Jane Foster with the help of Heimdall, where she is able to wield Mjolnir, becoming the Mighty Thor. Now, in the movie, I actually really enjoyed how Jane Foster became worthy to lift Mjolnir. When showing us the backstory of Thor and Jane dating, we see that Thor, one night while Jane was asleep and he was admiring her, is talking to Mjolnir, and he asks Mjolnir to protect her at all costs and to always be there for her. This is one reason that Mjolnir calls out to Jane while she has cancer. They also reveal that Jane is worthy to lift Mjolnir because when Thor was actually unworthy in the very first Thor film, Jane is the one who believed in Thor and helped him become worthy. So Jane Foster, who is dying of cancer, transforms into the Mighty Thor when she is wielding the hammer. When she transforms into the Mighty Thor, she has all the strength of a Thor, of a god. Unfortunately, much like in the comics, this actually kills her. When she's transformed into a god, 2 things actually happen. One is that her body actually cleanses itself of all poison. Therefore, it removes itself of all of the chemotherapy that has been done to it, because chemo is poison that attacks cells. So the body sees this as an attack, and when she becomes a god, it gets rid of the chemo, making the chemo completely ineffective. Also, at the same time, her cells harden because they become like a god cells, which in turn makes the cancer cells even stronger. So
your body develops cancer from poison
literally kills her, much like we saw in the
Should
movie.
have cured
She dies in the comics and she goes to Valhalla. But eventually Thor would end up bringing her back. Now, she would arrive in the same condition back on Earth, still having cancer, but she ends up beating it and ends up becoming a Valkyrie. So I'm assuming something very similar is going to be happening in the MCU. Jane is going to come back and help Thor raise love. Now, there's actually time travel involved in the comic story of Gorr the God Butcher. And there are many different Thors involved as well. A past Thor, a future future Thor, the Avengers as Thor, and here's where the story kind of is a little bit different, but essentially the same. Gorr is building a god bomb. A bomb that would destroy all of the gods in the universe. Now, in the movie, they replaced this with eternity. Eternity would grant a wish to the person that gets to it.
And a lot of guys would say that they've created a god bomb before.
It can grant that wish. Side note, we finally saw a cosmic entity in the MCU, and it was truly awesome. So Gorr makes it to eternity, and his plan was to wish for all of the gods to be dead. And in the final moment, Thor chooses to spend his last moments, what he believes are his last moments, with Jane, and he says he chooses love, and that Gorr can too. He can bring his daughter back. Gorr realizes that he's dying and says that his daughter will have nobody, but Jane says that she will have somebody. And she looks at Thor, and Thor agrees, basically saying that he will take care of his daughter. Now, all throughout the movie, Jane Foster is trying to come up with a catchphrase, and right before she dies, she tells Thor that she thinks she finally found one. She whispers in his ear, and Thor says, "It's perfect." And unfortunately, we don't know what it is. This is a nod to the comics where Nick Fury whispers in Thor's ear, and we originally don't know what he said. Down the road, Thor would eventually reveal it to Beta Ray Bill. So this is a little callback to that moment, but I think we all know what Jane Foster said. She said, "It's Thorbin time."
I'm like, boom, you looking for this?
Sadly, Jane Foster dies, Gorr dies as well, and Thor ends up with a daughter, Love, born from Eternity, who has some pretty cool powers that I know we're going to be seeing in the future of the MCU. Now, this is more of a redemption arc for Gorr. In the comics, he actually manages to bring his wife and his son back in a way, but eventually he gets really mad because his wife ends up calling him a god, and Gorr kills his wife. His son then releases some Thors who were held captive and tells them to kill his father. So the movie version is a much nicer redemption for Gorr the God Butcher. Now, like I mentioned, the second post-credit scene, we see Jane Foster arrive in Valhalla. She became the mighty Thor, she became a god, and she chose to fight and save the universe rather than save her own life. This earned her a spot in Valhalla, and she is greeted by none other than Heimdall. Heimdall says, "Thank you for looking after my son. You are very welcome here to the land of the gods. Welcome to Valhalla." Now, like I mentioned, in the comics, this happens. Jane dies in battle, so she earns a spot in Valhalla. But Thor channels the god Tempest through the broken Mjolnir and manages to call back Jane's consciousness into her body. Here she's given another second chance. She beats cancer and, like I mentioned, comes back as a Valkyrie. I'm assuming that something similar is going to happen here, as in the movie, after all the credits are done, it says Thor will return, and considering how well received Jane Foster's The Mighty Thor was, I'd say that she's coming back as well. Now, in the movie, we saw Thor and the rest of the gang go to Omnipotent City, where Zeus and a bunch of other gods dwell. Unfortunately, the other gods were kind of a disgrace and zero help at all. They end up fighting the gods, and Zeus throws a thunderbolt through Korg. This puts Thor in a rage as he thinks that Korg is dead, so he takes Zeus's thunderbolt as it's thrown at him, throws it right back at Zeus, and seemingly kills him. However, in the first post-credit scene, it is revealed that Zeus is alive, and he's pretty mad. He says, "It used to be that being a god meant something. People would whisper your name before sharing their deepest hopes and dreams. They begged you for mercy without knowing if you were actually listening." Zeus then laughs and says, "Now when they look to the sky, they don't ask us for lightning, they don't ask us for rain, they just want to see one of their so-called superheroes." This is obviously a reference to Thor, as he is the god of thunder, but also on Earth is an Avenger and a superhero. This is demonstrated actually in Thor Ragnarok, when he's sitting with Loki on the side of the street and people come up to him and ask to take his picture. But Zeus continues and he says, "When did we become the joke?" He says, "No more, they will fear us again, when Thor Odinson falls from the sky." Then it's revealed that he's actually talking to somebody. He says, "Do you understand me, Hercules? Do you understand me, my son?" Hercules is revealed, and he says, "Yes, father." Now, for those of you who watch Ted Lasso, you instantly know who this is. It is the actor Brett Goldstein, who plays Roy Kent in Ted Lasso. And he has packed on some serious muscle to play the role of Hercules, which, of course, you have to. It's Hercules. Now, in the comics, Thor and Hercules actually run into each other quite often. And yes, in the very beginning, they did clash a little bit and fight, but for the most part, they are actually allies. In fact, at one point in time, Hercules is even an Avenger. And they even refer to each other at some points as closest allies. So, although when Hercules and Thor are going to first meet in the MCU, I do see them clashing, I ultimately think that Hercules is going to be a good guy. In fact, in the comics, Hercules even realizes that his father Zeus isn't exactly the best. And then Hercules turns on him, and with the help of Thor, Zeus is eventually put on trial. So I'm assuming something very similar is going to happen here in the MCU. Thor and Hercules will fight, but Thor will eventually explain, hey, I was trying to save the universe, and your father did nothing to help. He was actually scared and actually kind of stood in Thor's way, telling him that he couldn't leave Omnipotent City. This will probably open the eyes of Hercules, realizing that Thor was actually in the right and his father was in the wrong, and that people shouldn't fear the gods, but the gods should actually be helping the people. I'm kind of expecting this to somewhat be like Guardians of the Galaxy and Adam Warlock. Yes, the Sovereign created Adam Warlock to destroy the Guardians of the Galaxy, but I'm betting by the end of the movie, Guardians 3, Adam Warlock becomes a Guardian of the Galaxy and is actually a hero, much like in the comics. And those are the post-credit scenes and the ending for Thor: Love and Thunder. Let me know what you thought of the movie. I want to know your thoughts in the comments down below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you love Marvel and the MCU. For live updates, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter. And as always, thank you all so much for watching. Woof woof.
Thank you very much for that, Cosmic Wonder. You really helped me. Seriously, I didn't know, like, a lot of parts of the Jane story or the Gore story, so that helps me out. Now, kind of helps piece certain things together a little better. Get over to Cosmic Wonder and subscribe. And if you enjoyed my reaction, make sure you hit like button, subscribe, and share. 10 million subscribers. Woo!